I was recently speaking to a property solicitor based in Leeds, and we were talking about HMOs in that part of Yorkshire and various investors I'm speaking to. We got onto the topic of Liverpool, and he said to me that the Liverpool's great, but the problem is the reason why nobody wants to invest there is the gun crime. As a man based in Liverpool, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a number of reasons I personally don't invest in Liverpool. Gun crime isn't one of them, I must say. Um, there are areas where violent crime is excessive in Liverpool, like there are in other major cities around the UK. However, when you think about property investments, it's really important to know the area that you're investing in. And what I mean by that is, at the moment, the rage about town is deal sourcing, and I can't
Mm.
switch on my social media account without having an influx of messages saying, "Hi, my name is X. I'm a deal sourcer. I've got this deal. It's 5 grand. If you want more details, that sort of thing." And what I encourage everybody to do is, if you identify a gold mine area that you want to invest in, really getting down into that granular level of detail. And what I mean by that, as an example, is where I invest is actually a place called Wirral, which is not Liverpool. It's very near to Liverpool, but it's not Liverpool. And there are certain streets where you could be in the north side of that street and you would invest in that all day long. But if you go past house number 38 into the south part of the street, it's going to be like Beirut,
Yeah.
and you're going to be replacing doors and windows every other day if you invest in that part. So having access to granular level detail, crime data is one obvious area that I would explore. But I actually only invest in areas where I fully understand the customer as a landlord, the customer avatar, and who is going to actually want to live in those areas. Because it's not only about the customer, i.e., the tenant, it's also about things like insurance. And do I really want to be getting call outs at 3 o'clock in the morning because the police have kicked the doors in? Or do I want a nice, happy set of tenants who are trouble free and want trouble free living? Which obviously I think every landlord would want that.
Mm. Well, that's a great answer. And it just goes to show the importance of really knowing your area. You mentioned the issue with deal sources. Previous issue earlier on in the year with John Solitro, we talked about this in detail. And yeah, it is like the Wild Wild West. Obviously, there's companies out there. None of us need to say their names. People know who they are. And I think certain education companies are selling the dream that anybody can have this laptop lifestyle and make like 5 grand a week for doing nothing. And of course, we both know it's absolute bollocks.
Yeah, I mean, I've got really good friends who are professional deal sources, who are fully accredited with not quite regulated bodies because it's an unregulated industry, but there are bodies that are trying to sort of govern the Wild West, as you put it,
Yeah.
which I think is a great way to talk about it. Um, and they are the real deal. They understand their areas. So you get, for example, you get a deal sourcer based in London. I say, great, where do you source deals? And say, anywhere in the UK. So if I give you a postcode, CH41, which is in Wirral, um, you could then sell me a complete duck egg because you don't know anything about CH41,
Yeah.
which isn't your problem because you've got your 3 grand and you're happy in your laptop lifestyle, as you quite eloquently put it. However, the deal sources I'm talking about, they stick to their area, they stick to what they know. They have the relationships with vendors, they have the relationships with estate agents. They know what is a good investment because they want the investor to come back time and time again. And of course, if you know, like, and trust somebody and they've built up that reputation with you, why wouldn't you use them a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time? Better to have 3 customers that keep coming back than having to find 1,000 customers all the time because you've got a really bad reputation for burning people.
Yeah, very, very true. And I think, especially me, where I live in Kent, houses aren't cheap. So for a long time, I had that, I guess, like a scarce mindset of thinking I can't afford to buy around here. So, of course, for that reason, I was looking up north and around different parts of the country. But of course, that whole time you're doing that, you're not mining your deepest mine, which is your local area. And obviously, as you said, who can know an area better than a person who lives in it? So
Absolutely, and that's something that I really do live by. I invest heavily in the area I know and understand. It takes an awful lot to get me to deviate from that area because if there's problems, I'm not sort of on hand to deal with them. I'm not really a control freak. I don't want to deal with problems, so I try to mitigate those problems at the initial purchase phase or the design phase. So I know that I'm not going to get any problems, or if I do get any, they're going to be very easily manageable rather than, again, having to replace a composite door or a set of windows because they've gone in again,
Yeah,
4 days into a tenancy.
interesting. So, Cole, just to paint a picture on your background, you're a health and safety consultant in the construction industry since 2013, and then you decided to branch out. What was the reasoning with that? What happened there?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite right. I still am a health and safety consultant, but I was working for really large blue chip organizations across not only the UK, but across the Middle East and North Africa as well. And I had a really good job, really good salary by any sort of common metric. And it was great. But I was not really staying home very often. I was constantly on the move, flying around the world or driving around the UK. I was very rarely at home with my family, of which, I had a son who was relatively young at that time, and my daughter was preteen level, if you like. She was sort of 12, 13. And I missed out on an awful lot of childhood experience with my kids. And the lady who I was with as well at the time, we were it wasn't really a great relationship to begin with anyway, but we sort of made it work. And when I decided I wanted to go out on my own, I think it's really important to recognize that there are some people in your life who will be your cheerleader and there will be other people that won't. So if you have a person in your life that it's in your real inner sanctum, your inner circle, and you say, look, I'm thinking about setting up my own company. And they say, oh no, don't do that. That's a stupid idea. You're never going to get any work. That'll fail within the first couple of weeks, or you've tried that before and that failed. And if you get a person like that in your life, and some of them are very well-intentioned people, these are not nasty people or people that wish you ill. They can be very well-intentioned people because there's a lot of fear. And I had that in my life. And I decided I was going to quit my sort of blue chip job and set up my own consultancy practice, which I did in 2016, 17. And we sort of went from there, really. But then the other part of that is, recognizing what I wanted to achieve in life wasn't really what my partner wanted to achieve. So, you know, unfortunately, that did lead to a marital breakdown, a divorce. And, while there was some really quite sad elements to that, there was also some really very positive elements. And it was sort of like basically unshackling somebody to release their full potential. And in that time, I met a real cheerleader, if you like. I'll call her my cheerleader, who's now wife number 2 or version number 2, as I often call her. And she's the updated version, and she's an absolute cheerleader. That doesn't mean she always agrees with me. I must be very clear. Finding that one person in your life who is your absolute cheerleader and who wants you to reach the full potential that you have as an individual, you cannot put a price, you cannot pay for that. That it's just finding that is when you get hold of it, you don't let it go. And I'm very, very lucky and very privileged to have that person in my life, which is my version number 2, my new wife.
Excellent. And what's your, so basically, when did you first get into property? What was your first investment property? Do you remember it?
I remember it like it was today. Yeah, the first investment property I purchased, it was an absolute nightmare. And it was an auction. It was a pre-auction purchase, actually. And it was for 55 grand, 55,000 quid. It was Harrowby Road in Birkenhead, CH42, 2-bedroom terrace. So very standard run-of-the-mill property.
2 up, 2 down.
2 up, 2 down, exactly that. 55k purchase, pre-auction. Didn't read the small print. There was a 5 grand fee. So that took it up to 61 grand. There was no stamp duty or land tax because it was the first property. So there was 0 on that, which was one thing. But I was a member of a property community, and I put the deal out, and some people said, "Oh yeah, be happy to chat with you." didn't return calls. So I'm like sweating and I'm getting stressed. In the end, I spoke to my solicitor who does all of our deals now because of this event, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, right, okay, what's the plan? You've got to complete in 6 days, and that was a weekend included, so it was actually only 4 days.
Oh, so sorry, you paid on the hammer, then you had 7 days to complete.
Well, we had 28 days to complete, but we were let down by investors because in the education circuit they say
Got it.
get the deal now and get the investors later. So I followed that advice, ridiculous as it is now. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll get an investor, no problem. And no investor came forward. So like 6 days left to go, 2 of which is a weekend. I went to the solicitor. I was like, what do I do? And then what actually happened is the solicitor put in a call. He found me a local bridging finance company, which don't normally allow you to get a bridge below £100,000. But he did a sort of favor for a mate and he gave me the bridge. And I wasn't prepared for a bridge. I knew nothing about bridging. And
Wow.
what happened was, oh my God, the bridge, they do something called rolled up interest, which means when they give you the principal loan, they take the interest off in advance. So when we were ready to exchange,
Wow.
it was
Another bill.
6,000 quid short,
Yeah.
which
Another
I wasn't
bill.
expecting. So he said, well, right, you're £6,000 short. Where's your £6,000? And I was like, what? So basically, I had to take 6 credit cards that day, draw £500 out of each credit card, which was the maximum limit you could draw out. And then I had to go the next day, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, get another £500 out per credit card, which cost a fortune in interest,
Yeah, yeah.
and so on and so forth. And I had to turn up with the solicitors with this big bundle of cash. And he was like, right, okay, we can't accept cash. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
what do I do? So I had to go to the bank, put the cash in the bank, and they were like, what's this cash from? I was like, I sold my car. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So I took the cash and then made the transfer. Absolute nightmare. Got the property over the line on the last day. Otherwise, we would have faced penalties. And then it took like 5 months to get it refurbed. It was only a light refurb, but my business partner wanted to do it themselves rather than bring a builder in. And yeah, it cost us way more than what it should have done. And yeah, I think it ended up costing 7% in interest at the time because of the
Wow.
delay and the way the markets moved. So I remember it like it was this morning.
I can see that's
Like,
incredible. Like the level of detail as well. Like you literally, it was like it was today.
yeah, honestly, it was so stressful. But now the property on the flip side of that, the property valuation now is does 90,000 quid. Got most of the money back. My business partner actually wanted to sell his share in the business because he wanted money to put his kid to uni. Actually, I think it was to buy visas to come over because he wasn't from the UK,
Mm.
as children from South Africa. So it was to buy their visas. So he asked me to buy him out of his share of the property, which I
Nice.
did. So now I own 100% of that, and it's rented out, and we've never had a single void in that property. It's been a
Wow.
great experience.
Wow. So look how many lessons there were in that alone. So from what I can hear, the amount of lessons from the beginning was number one was do your homework. Number two, read the small print. Number three, find an investor before you commit. But also I like the way that actually you committed, then you had to go and figure it out. And all of a sudden the universe started making things happen.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is in property, you have to be prepared for the unexpected, and you can
Mm.
make a plan. And the moment that things go green light, that plan goes to dog shit. And the measure of the person, the measure of the character of the person is, what do I do now the plan has fallen apart? So improvise, adapt, and overcome. They are the absolute core beliefs that are ingrained within our business model. It's like, yeah, you've made a plan, but it didn't go ahead. So what do you want now?
Yeah.
What we can go and cry under a pillow and say it's all over and lose our money, which absolutely is an option, or we can move heaven and earth and make things work. And as you say, the universe does provide if you're willing to not accept no for an answer and really put yourself through a lot of stress. I'm not going to lie, it wasn't an easy job, but finding people who would help you. And now that relationship from that lawyer, because of what they did for us,
Yeah. You're never going to forget.
every single deal we do, every family law matter that we do, our trusts, our wills, all of our property deals, any contract deals that we do when we do business acquisition, everything goes through that lawyer. So because he made one phone call,
Yeah.
last year we paid him 100 grand in fees.
Wow. Look at that.
Just
Just
in one
goes to
phone call.
show.
And we're going to stay loyal to him forever now, unless he does something catastrophically terrible to us.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll have our loyalty forever because of what he did.
And then what was it? So what was the next property after that transition? Like, so what happened after? Was it a long time between your next one, or did you think, oh, right, I like this and got educated? What happened after that?
So I think we got that property in the December, and actually I went ahead and got a lease option property next because I bought a business in January 2023, and as part of the deal, I actually the chap who I bought the business from, he also owned the commercial premises that the business was operating from. So actually, I got a 5-year lease option on that property. So
Nice.
we've agreed a price, and the reason why the lease option works so well for us is it's not very difficult to understand, but basically we agreed a price of £65,000 for that particular property, and what we did, we're not paying for the property yet. We're paying him rent of £400 per calendar month, so 100 quid a week on average. But the value of that property's already gone up to 85,000. So we're using that value as a deposit to buy the building. So it's
Got it.
actually cost us zero to
Wow.
buy that building. And that was the second one that we bought.
Wow. So basically, what forced the value?
It's in the area. There's been some additional works going on. There's some light industrial complexes being built, and it's also got planning permission to build a flat above it because it's a flat roof commercial premises with nothing above. So there's planning permission to build a 1-bedroom flat.
Got it. Okay. Wow. That's impressive. And then after that, did it start to snowball? Because obviously, I know your portfolio is a hell of a lot bigger now. So what happened after that?
It didn't really do that much for a little while. I went and got, with the help of somebody that you might know, a property in Gainsborough,
Yep.
and that was a 3-bedroom terraced house. So that was done in really good time with a decent local builder. Actually, that was a real punt actually because I didn't know the area at all. Uh,
Yeah.
but the chap who introduced me to that deal was really keen as mustard and a great guy to work with. So that was awesome.
He's
Um,
talking about me, by the way, just for the listeners. And
I didn't know if you wanted to take any
yeah,
credit for it or not. So I
yeah.
just,
So yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, me and Carl worked together, and I basically I'll jump in. So me and Carl were in the same education program, and how we met was once a month they do like a deal clinic. I think I was in my first or second month. I jumped up on stage, super keen as I always am. Found this deal, secured it at auction, or I can secure it at price X. I know the auctioneer. I can find the local tradesman. And Carl was the only person in the room that backed me. So we went ahead and did that project. And it became a bit of a combination of a number of things. It was an buy at auction, and then it became a BRRR using bridging finance, and then a buy to let at the end. Unfortunately, at that time, my credit history was terrible. I couldn't get a mortgage, which I didn't realize. So Carl bought me out, and now he owns it and he's still cash flowing, I take it.
well, it's not been without its hiccups. The tenant that we had in there in the first place, which actually you found. So I'm blaming you for this. I'm pointing the finger at you now. Their visa expired 3 days before the tenancy was due to expire, so they couldn't actually get a property. And it was really that the letting agents, they just sort of checked, do you have right to work? Yes. But they didn't check how long do you have
Wow.
right to work for. So they got another £1,000 fee out of me to get another tenant in place. And then that tenant decided they wanted to move to Scotland. So another £1,000 for another tenant. And, it's actually never made any money, that property, because of
Wow.
fees that keep on getting taken off. But the letting agent is very happy.
Yeah,
All of
yeah.
the fees. But
So, okay, so this is very interesting for the listeners. So now look at, if you think about earlier on when you was talking about having a plan when things don't go well. So what is your thought process now with that property? What are you thinking? Are you thinking that the solution is to sell it and come out of it and you recycle your funds elsewhere, or how are you going to handle that?
so I ended up getting a 5-year interest only mortgage on that property as the exit strategy as a buy to let. And don't get me wrong, the property was valued at 90,000, so it definitely is a decent property. But again, it was with a lender where it's quite a high interest only repayment. I think it rents out at 650 and it's 517 for the repayment mortgage. So there's not much in it.
Mm.
But my strategy is keep and hold because I'm not in it for the short term.
Yeah.
We don't just make money from property, we make money from our businesses. So we use our business as our money factory. And then when the factory produces the money bag, we then use that to buy assets. So that's our model and that works for
Got
us.
it. So
What I was going to say is we keep hold of the property, not because we want the monthly rent. It's because we want the capital appreciation over time
got it.
and
Yeah.
legacy. So that's the big plan.
Yeah. And that's great. So basically, like Robert Kiyosaki talks about, you don't sell, you just buy, acquire, and obviously over time, as you said, the capital appreciation, use time to erode the debt, right?
Absolutely right. So, that's already happening now. Inflation has risen. I think it's the 58,000 quid debt that we have on that property, is nothing really. We could probably afford to just pay off the debt, but then why would we?
Yeah.
Why would we have the unencumbered property when we're making the bank's money work for us?
Is it now rented out? That's the question I want to know.
It's about to be rented out on the 19th. So it's had a void of 3 months, which, I've had to pay that void period, which, it's not a big deal, but this is something that maybe people don't necessarily understand in property because the property course providers always sell you the high, but they never talk about the low.
Mm.
So if you've got a void for 3 months because it was void just before Christmas, no one wants to move over Christmas. January, we were getting applicants and they didn't want to do open banking reference checks, that sort of stuff. So now we've, teetered on into February. So that's 3 months worth of mortgage payments at 517 per month, plus the water rates, the council tax, and all the other bits. So it works out. It's about 700 quid a month that we have to pay out of our own pocket for that property. So if you were just relying on that one property as an income, well, now you're minus £700 every single
Wow.
month. And if you're earning, let's say 40 grand a year, so you're only getting about 2,600 a month in your salary. If you're living in Kent or in London and you've got rent to pay, that's £700. You're really going to feel the pinch of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were basically. So making sure that you've got
£8,400 a year, right?
yeah, exactly right. So, and it's not only that, but what if the tenant doesn't pay as well? Have you got right insurance? Have they got guarantors? And in that particular area, it's a really poor socio-economic area. So there's lots of benefit related tenants.
Mm.
They're nice people, but that comes with its own set of special problems in terms of getting rent off them and so on. So having a guarantor in place is really quite important, which already for that tenant has actually proven to be useful because they hadn't paid all the rent yet and they're not even moved in. So having the guarantor in place and they've given them a nudge and they've paid the rent now.
Okay, so very interesting for the listeners to see how you can have a plan, a project doesn't go to plan at all, but you had your contingencies in place, you had reserves, and then because of that, you've been able to survive. So what other projects have you done since then, Carl? Anything different, anything larger?
Yeah, actually, in 2023, I made a JV business partnership with somebody, another person that I met at quite a well-known property training program, who's an architect, and we hit it off really quickly, actually. And it was really funny because we were at a networking event, and your network is your net worth. I really believe that. I've met wonderful people, yourself included in that, through a network who I never ever would have met.
So true.
Being that we're 200 plus miles away from each other. So, anyway, one day she's sitting next to me. She said, "Oh, well, hello, I'll introduce myself." And she did. And she said, "What's your name? Where are you from?" And I told her, "I'm Carl, I'm from Wirral." She went, "Oh my God, I've got 2 properties in Wirral. I'm from Greenwich." And I was like,
Ah,
wow, that's really
yeah,
weird.
Yeah.
So we sort of kept in touch every week, just like, how's it going? And you sort of, it's like dating, when you're looking at a business partner, I recommend everybody goes on a few dates first, just to see, because it's like, I might like what I see, but can I work with you? Are you somebody I can see myself working with? Do you have the same goals as me, the same thoughts as me? Do you have different skills that complement mine? Not necessarily the same skills, because obviously it's great if If you can do A and I can do B, and that makes a great C, that would be amazing.
Chalk
And
and cheese, right? They often refer to it.
absolutely, and that worked really well. And anyway, we stayed in touch and we found a project that we wanted to work on together, which was converting a large 4-bed terrace into a 5-bed HMO. And we put some plans together. We went to a SaaS pot of investors. And for the listeners who might not know, a SaaS pot is a pension, a private pension that people can choose, control that pension pot, and they can determine where they invest their money. And as long as it's a commercial project, which an HMO is, we found an investor. Actually, we found several investors who wanted to invest in us because I'm a chartered builder. She's an architect. What could go wrong, right? Everything would be perfect. Yeah, sure. But anyway, that was £145,000 purchase price in Birkenhead, which for everyone down south will sound like a steal. Great transport links, great community links, an hour from the airport for Manchester and Liverpool, 2 hours from London via train, supermarket and doctor's practice right next door, 30 seconds walk.
Wow.
Wonderful recreation facilities around. So this is like great. It's
Ticks all
Liverpool.
the boxes.
Exactly right. And it's like 9 minutes bus ride to Liverpool, as well as Liverpool city centre. So this is a great environment, great location. We got the investor on board. I had to pay 9,000 quid to do with SaaS fees and stamp duty, legal fees. So that was about 9 grand. And then the project was meant to take 6 months. So I laugh. I probably shouldn't be laughing. I probably should be buried in a bottle of scotch right now. But we only just completed. It was meant to be completed in January 24. It completed 3 weeks ago.
Wow.
So
What the hell? Delayed it a year and like a
over a
week?
year, yeah. So builders and really, this is where doing due diligence is so very important, and keeping on top of your project is so very important. This was a relatively straightforward project. There was lots of internal refurbishment. There was no external really. But in the end, we actually converted to a 6-bed HMO, which was great, with an extra bathroom that we weren't planning on, and a small kitchenette, which we also weren't planning on. And we also refurbished the kitchen entirely, which we also weren't planning on. So our budget went from a sort of 60k refurb to 85k refurb.
With the commercial valuation, then did that push it up a hell of a lot more than your projected
Well,
GDV?
Well, what's actually happened is the fourth builder we ended up with. So we went through 3 builders who,
Well, so I've got to ask, were they English?
yeah, they were all English.
That's why they were bloody hard work. They're spoiled, right?
Oh my goodness me. I could tell you some stories, but that's probably a whole podcast unto itself, the stories of those builders. But with the fourth builder came over the line in the end. There's still a few little bits, but the majority of the work has been done and it's ready to go. But they also own a letting agency. So they had the property for 6 weeks, ready, unencumbered, ready to let out. 6 weeks, they had 1 guaranteed tenant ready to move in. I just so happened to have a conversation with somebody in my network about a completely unrelated issue. And he said, would you not consider serviced accommodation? I said, oh, not really, because I can't be dealing with the peaks and the troughs of the industry. He said, well, have a word with this guy, because he deals with a lot of contractors. So anyway, I went and spoke to this guy, and we've now secured a 6-month cash payment up front, serviced accommodation. So the reason why this is so good is if the HMO was fully occupied, it would be a gross rent of 3,100.
I'll calculate here so you can hit me with any figure.
So 3,150 is the gross rent per calendar month, and that's as an HMO.
Times 6 months, yeah?
No, that's the HMO. So
yeah, if it was, is that per month?
Sorry, yeah, that's per month.
3,150 per month, yeah?
Yeah. So if you times it by 6 months, be
18,900.
Okay. But instead, we got £4,095 a month times 6 months, which should be 24,500.
Correct, yeah, 24,570.
So the difference there, and it's
take away 18,900. Same property, you got a difference of 5,670 divided by 6. It's another £945 a month.
That's by changing the strategy.
Obviously, for those that don't know what service accommodation is, that's your Airbnb model. So Carl's secured 1 booking with a long-term client. None of this one-night bookings, paying cleaners after someone's been there for 24 hours and paid and trashed the place. Secured a long-term booking for 6 months and just locked away like 24K. Yeah.
in one day, you know. So the advantages to this were we would still be paying the cleaners and the HMO anyway, so that's an additional cost we would have had to foot the bill out of our 3,000 per month. But the advantage was these guys want to have a 2-year contract, but they're trying it out for the first 6 months.
Cool.
So they're paying cash up front as well for all of them. So there's no individual ASTs or tenancy agreements. So there's none of this, well, I don't get on with John and I don't get on with Gillian and I don't get on with Jack. And,
Yeah.
there's all this sort of dispute. They all work
They'll
together.
work together.
So for us, this is ideal. And in fact, actually what's happened is we went through an intermediary to do this and they called us the next day and said, have you got any more properties? So
Wow.
what I'm going to be doing is we're refinancing, which is the really good bit I'm going to come on to in a second. We originally had this GDV at 260,000.
How many bedrooms is it now, Cole?
It's 6 bedrooms now
Yeah.
rather than 5. But we've actually had it revalued and it's worth 300,000.
Great.
So we've added an extra 40K on.
So towards
it's
70%, would you get?
75% LTV. So it should give us 225 back out.
Correct.
And then that pays our 145 back to our investor, plus it pays the 80K that we actually put into the property.
Blinding. So is it an infinite return on investment now?
Infinite return on, well, I think it'll end up where we're minus $2,000, but obviously with the rent paid in advance,
Yeah.
we've just made it all back.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Infinite return.
So are you now in love with SA? Are you now thinking,
Well, no, because I don't really understand the SA market as well as many other people out there do, and I'm certainly not an expert, so please don't take what I'm saying as expert advice, because it certainly isn't. What we're now doing is we are creating a dual exit strategy for all of our HMO projects that we've got in the pipeline. So you can get something called a complex buy-to-let mortgage, which allows you to have HMO and SA in the same property at the same time. It's a slightly more expensive product by about 0.1%. But what that means is you could be occupying rooms 1 and 2 as an HMO tenant with an AST, with a proper tenancy agreement. Well, I could have the other 4 rooms rented out as an SA. That might not work in reality because, you don't want a stag weekend to come in and wreck the house that you're permanently residing in.
Yeah.
So you do have to be a bit careful. But the reason why we've gone down this route is because if I pick up the phone to that intermediary tomorrow and say, listen, I've got a new 6-bedroom house, do you want it? And they say no, I could then rent that out as an HMO. But if I can't rent it out as an HMO as quickly as I'd like, I've got the alternative of serviced accommodation. And even if one of the things we're going through at the moment is we're going through licensing for HMO with the local authority, which takes up to 12 weeks. So we could only put 4 people into the property, which means we're losing money while we're waiting for the license. So really, the SA has been an absolute blessing for us because we've occupied all the rooms at a really good rate and making an extra 900 quid a month for it.
Wow. So again, I guess a very interesting lesson there is diversification, not having all your eggs in one property strategy.
Yeah.
And that one there, for example, that is cash rolling or basically covered the negative equity on the Gainsborough one, or not negative. That has covered the money being lost in the Gainsborough property, for example.
It would do if it was just me as the sole owner of that building. But obviously, JVs differ, joint ventures differ. It depends what your agreement is with each individual. On this particular JV, it is a clear 50-50 split. So half of the profit would be mine and half of the profit would be my business partner's. Not every JV is like that, but that is what we have elected to do. I mean, she put just as much work in as I did. And this was all agreed contractually from the outset, which is a really important lesson. If you're going to work with another person, having a contract in place with heads of terms to make sure we all agree what you are going to do and what I am going to do and what that split is going to look like financially at the end of the road, including if you want to sell or exit from the business and I don't, or the other way around. So we're all very, very clear on who's going to pay what.
Okay. What are the primary things you love about property?
There's one thing I love about property and one thing only. A bank will lend money against property. So I want to explain that a little bit more. If I went to the bank and said, I've got a really good business idea and I think it could make millions. I'm going to teach bunny rabbits how to trade cryptocurrency. And I want £100,000 loan. They'd say, you're an idiot, go away, or words to that effect. But if I then said to the same bank, I want to teach bunny rabbits how to trade crypto, and I'm willing to give you equity stake in my house against this, so I want £100,000 loan bet against my house, they'd say, of course, Mr. Mannion. And
Yeah.
that's the power of property. It's the leverage you have to access finance. And no other asset has quite the same amount of leverage as property does, even though, yes, you can get logbook loans, you can get loans against luxury items like art and precious metals. Absolutely, you can. I'm not saying you can't. But property is known and it is trusted by the main lending houses and also property investors and private banks and private individuals. So you can access money that you can't otherwise usually access just by owning a few properties. And it's the quickest way to increase your net worth as well.
Mm.
Because
Couldn't agree more. So you've got multiple seven-figure businesses.
Mm.
What are your primary businesses, Carl, that fund your property empire?
So our main business is care. Back in 2020, I spoke to my partner and I said to her, she was a care worker, and a couple of years past, I'd lost my nan, who was my absolute world. And I didn't like how she was. Yeah, thanks, mate. I was beside myself when I lost my nan. But what really left a sting for me is how she was being cared for by carers going into the house. And people always talk about clap for the NHS, clap for carers. It's total bullshit. There are plenty of people who are carers and who work for the NHS who should never work in either of those organizations. And it doesn't matter what you or any other people think about that statement. I'm on the inner circle of that and I see it daily.
Sure.
So I said to my partner, we should set up a care service. And she said, absolutely not. And I said, okay. Are you going to bed? She said, yeah. And off she went. And I got my laptop out and started, how do you run a care business? And I knew nothing about care, nothing at all.
Wow.
But I knew that there is a continual need for care services in the UK. And that is an unmet demand for that particular service. So there's a huge supply shortage and a high demand, much like property. So we set up the care service. There was a ton of hoops to jump through, and about a year and a bit later, we got our first client, and we've not looked back since. There has been incredibly hard work, I must say. We made loads of mistakes. We now hire overseas workers who are absolutely fantastic. They are not a patch on our indigenous population's work ethic. Overseas workers are just like workers from the 1950s in the UK, will work until, the job is done.
Yeah.
And they've allowed us to thrive. And then we bought another care service in 2023, which I've mentioned already. And the British workforce lasted about 10 minutes with us. And we brought in overseas workers and we have thrived by 10x.
Wow.
So we've gone from sort of like 30 grand a year to 700 grand a year to 2 million a year. And it's just sort of gone from that, and all because we got the right workforce with the right attitude and the right leadership in place.
Wow.
So that's our main principal interest. That's our cash factory, if you like.
So are you basically actively doing M&As, mergers and acquisitions? Is this something that you're looking to constantly expand?
Yeah, exactly right. So I am developing the lessons learned training courses for people now to come on board with a no bullshit approach of how to grow your company from 0 to 1 million in very short thrift, with very little in terms of investment to do that through mergers and acquisitions as a major strategy, because we have learned how to do that now and trained and done that successfully ourselves. And we couldn't have got to the level of attainment that we had without that strategy. So we're actually releasing an accredited training program in the very near future, specifically for people to understand how to grow a business so quickly and cash flow that to the point where you can then go on and buy other assets quickly such as properties, which is, of course, what we're talking about today.
Okay, now you've got this incredibly successful business. It's funding your growing property empire. Would I be right in thinking that you had a load of help from childhood that propelled you onto this trajectory?
No, not at all. I grew up in a place called Birkenhead in Wirral, which for 5 years on the bounce has been one of the poorest areas in the whole of England. My biological father is a drug addict. My mum was on state benefits for most of my life. She had a job towards the end as a sort of a cleaner and a dinner lady, as we would call them back in the day. So she was on very, very limited funds. She did the absolute best she could with what she had. A stepdad who didn't work at all. He was on disability benefits for a bad back for every year that I've known him since 1987, and still is to this day. So I didn't
How,
have the advantage in the
sure.
terms of, having knowledgeable people around me. There was one car. I tell everyone this story. There was one car in our street in the 1990s, and it was a guy who had a red Jaguar XK. And I remember looking at this car, falling in love with it. And he said to me, "You can look, but you can't touch." And he wouldn't let anyone play football, play Kirby by his car, which of course I totally
Yeah, we
understand.
used to play that.
And I went to a house party one night when I was 14, and I went to a school where it was like a mixture of working class benefits and middle class people. I went to this house party, and I stroll up to this house, and there's 3 cars in the drive. Now I have only seen one car in a street at this point in my life, so I'm seeing 3 cars in one drive. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I walked in, and everybody's having this party, and the mum of the daughter who I was there to actually see her was trying to cop off with her. But I went to see her mum, Carol, and I said to this woman, "Carol, whose are these 3 cars?" And she's like, "What?" She said, "Mine, my husband's, and David's, who was the older brother of the girl I was trying to cop off with." And I was like, "How did they get these cars? How'd you get these cars?" And she's like, "Well, we we were." She was just totally baffled by this
Yeah,
14-year-old kid asking this stupid questions. And she's like, "Well, we go to work and we need the cars." And I was like, "So you own the cars? And how did David get the car?" And he's like, "Well, he worked as an ice cream man, selling ice creams in the park for the 6 weeks holidays, and then he got enough money and bought a car." And I was like, "So you can actually buy a car?" And she was like, "Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to have a car to pay for the mortgage." And I'm like, "What's a mortgage?"
yeah.
And she's
Wow.
like, "Well, to buy the house, you got to go get money from the bank." And I was like, "What? You can buy a house?" And she was like, she must have thought I was like some alien that
Yeah,
on the Mars or something. I don't know, but I had no financial education at all. Up until I was in my late 30s, I had no financial education. I had a job, just over broke,
just over broke.
but I did not have a financial education. I did not understand that the way you get money doesn't have to be working for somebody else and then you get a pay slip at the end of the month.
Mm.
I didn't know that. And much to my sort of sadness, really, because I would have been a lot better off. But I did try and change it. I wrote to loads of property companies. I phoned them up and I said, "Look, I've got no money. I got nothing, but I'm willing to come to your event. I'll bust tables for you. I'll volunteer. I'll lick your shoes, whatever it is. I just want to learn from you." And they all said no or didn't answer at all. You had to have the cash. You got to
Mm.
pay to play. And
Cash is king still.
cash is king. And I got into a lot of debt for that education over the course of sort of from 2022 onwards. I got into quite a lot of debt to pay for that education in the end, but I came good out of it, which very few people do, in fact, actually, because these property companies, they talk the talk and they get the money off you. But if you look at the success rates, the
So
success
true.
ratios per person, you might get 100 people in a room, but they're not motivated. They're just professional course goers. They're professional, "Oh, yeah, I've got the information and I'll take 3.5 years to get it." It's only those people who are truly motivated that will be successful, which
Mm.
I'm one of them, that they post up and say, "Oh, look at this guy. He's done this. He's done this."
Yeah,
But, most people don't.
you're right. Yeah, because they don't take the action. And you hear this a lot. The price tag of the course, although it's a lot of money, it's not painful enough, is it?
I know a guy who paid for something called a plutonium package with a company, and it's over £30,000 with the VAT. And unlimited attempts at any course they want. And I spoke to them a year later and asked them, how is your property journey? I'm still waiting to find one
Wow.
property, and pay 30 grand.
That's insane.
And what they do is they pay for all of these courses, which of course the property companies want you to do. They get a big chunk of change, which is great. They've got to pay for their third Lamborghini, no problem.
Yeah.
But then this person is like, oh, I've done SA, now I've done HMO, now I've done commercial conversion, now I've done buy to let, now I've done rent to SA. They've done all these strategies, but they're not picking anything.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
not
So
getting
they're getting like and also, they're getting like the rush of endorphins of the feeling that they're busy learning something new, but actually not mastering one thing.
and what I've done, and I've made this my rule in this property network. I've paid for one course, got something out of it, and then I've paid money for something else.
Very
So I
good.
want to prove your model first. I want to see that it works, and once I've seen that it works, I'll say, right, okay, now I'll give you some more money, and then once that's worked, I'll give you some more money.
Very
Uh,
wise. So when did you create your podcast, Lazy Wealth Creation podcast?
that was September 2024.
What's the inspiration behind the name, Carl?
So basically, so the reason I call it lazy wealth is because I don't expect you to come on a 5-year mastermind with me and give me £100,000 to get wealthy. You can start the process of changing your wealth today from one of our podcasts, which lasts for about 20 minutes maximum. Because there's ideas there where you can implement them with the technology that you have on your mobile phone at zero cost. What we're doing is saying, look, no charge, no cost. These are ideas to make money that we've actually tried and tested ourselves that have worked. So we've done them. We know it works. And one example, where I live in Wirral, has got this beautiful view of Liverpool, beautiful view of Ireland, and a beautiful view of Wales, because it's a peninsula. So we're surrounded on three sides by water. So what I did is I put a thing on Eventbrite where I said cycle tours, scenic and panoramic views of Liverpool, Wales, and Ireland. And I put that to be found
Clever
in
idea.
Canada, America, the United States, and Germany, because lots of people migrated to Canada, Australia, and the United States, and Germany just because they've got crazy cycle people. So I said, I'll take you on a cycle tour. It's 25 quid a ticket, and it's going to be a full day. It's an 8-hour thing, but we're going to stop off for lunch. I did a deal with 3 pubs. So we stop off and
I'm sold like already.
Right. It was 10%. I get a 10% kickback of all the meals, not the drinks. And I had t-shirts that you could buy for 40 quid, which cost me 12 quid to get made. And I did all of this stuff and got it ready. And the insurance to do this was £70 for the year.
Wow.
And the Eventbrite is free. They take the money off the person when they've paid for the ticket. So there was no cost to me for that. It's a little bit more expensive if you do it that way. But I made 21 quid per ticket. And I sold, within 1 week, I sold 40 tickets.
Wow.
And I didn't even have a bike, because I don't have a bike. I didn't want it. I just wanted to see if it would work.
If it work.
But then you tell me, not necessarily you personally,
Yeah.
but people say to me, you can't make money. I'm like, how can you not make money? Money is everywhere, but you are not looking at it. You are not looking at the opportunity. And
that's an incredible idea. I've got to say, that's amazing.
What we're trying to do is teach people the process of making money is the same. And it's not about what can I do that you're going to give me cash for? That's the wrong mindset. It's what value can I bring to your life that you're willing to pay me for? So it's about serving. It's not about taking. And a lot of people get confused with that. They don't understand there's a huge difference in the mindset. What is it that you want that I can provide for you? Not, this is my service and therefore you should pay for it because I think.
It's a very, very powerful way to frame it, because it's like you said in a recent post about red rag to the ball is not, I can't afford that, but how can I afford that? It's the same thing, right?
It's a huge mindset issue. People are happy to take, but it's not necessarily there. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but we have a system where we encourage people to take for free. I pay the money so somebody else can take for free. And that is not encouraging the country as a whole to increase its GDP, because why should I? I can stay at home and get £2,000 a month in benefits, which we know because we have tenant applications saying they get £3,000 a month in benefits, £2,600 a month in benefits.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, that's a salary for someone.
That
And
is
that's
it. Yeah.
tax-free. That's tax-free. That's 40 grand a year
Yeah.
if
It's
you were to
crazy.
work.
So tell me about this fully accredited health and safety course for landlords, investors, and builders.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So I'm a chartered health and safety professional. I'm a chartered builder. My bias, my experience is in construction from all over the world. And one of the things that I noticed when I started out in property investing is that there is absolutely no knowledge of how to stay legally compliant within the landlord space and even the small builder space. What a lot of people don't necessarily understand is that they are 100% accountable for all construction projects. And they say, well, we're not doing construction. This is the great misunderstanding. So if you're changing a door, changing a window, hanging internal doors, painting, decorating, putting carpets in, refurbishing a kitchen, a bathroom, putting on a new roof, changing the gutter in, all of these are very standard things you would do in a typical buy-to-let property, moving a stud wall, electrics. Landlords are 100% accountable for any issues that happen from a health and safety perspective. But what they think is, oh no, I've employed a contractor and it's their job. And
Yeah.
actually, on the courses, that's what these big courses actually teach you. Oh yeah, and your contractors take care of that. No, the contractors don't take care of that. And I would challenge people who are perhaps listeners onto your great podcast, who are property landlords themselves, ask your builder, who's the client in construction design management regulations? Just ask that one question. And the contractor wouldn't have a clue, not a jar, because they've got no formal education in what that means. So if the builder doesn't know and you don't know, how are you managing the risk to your project? And that is the critical question that people can't answer. So when I surveyed a load of really experienced landlords quite recently, actually, and I asked them, this is a program that we've launched for you. So, oh, well, I don't need that. We've never had any problems with that before. And
No
it's
one's died on the building site yet.
yeah. Well, here's the thing about CDM, right? And health and safety legislation as a whole. Nobody needs to even be injured for you to be prosecuted. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're doing some roof work on your project and you've put some scaffolding up because it's a bit of a larger roof, for example, some basic scaffolding up. And an HSE inspector drives by, or you've got an angry neighbor who doesn't like the radio that they're playing and they're wolf whistling at their teenage daughter who's going to school in their uniform, which, let's be honest, builders sometimes can operate just like that. Okay.
Very true.
So they phone the HSE, which is the local council, and the council comes down and they go, ooh, that scaffold isn't safe. It's not been bolted into the wall. It's not got any walk boards. It's not got any barrier protection, no edge protection. The guy who's on the roof or the girl who's on the roof is wearing trainers, and they're behaving badly. Nobody's been injured, but because the HSE enforcement officer has seen it, they can now write you up and they give you what's called a fee for intervention, which is currently, I think, about £184 an hour, something like that. That gets written down in a little book that's public domain knowledge. So I can check your credentials as a property investor, property landlord, to see if you've had a fee for intervention. And then if you get too many of them, the HSE will seek to prosecute you.
Wow.
So it's not just about you not killing anyone. You don't even need to have hurt anybody. They can prosecute you or give you a fee for intervention, which is basically like a parking ticket, but for health and safety.
Yeah.
They can do that. And they can also close down your site for 28 days. They can give you what's called a prohibition notice. So they say, look, you've got to take down that scaffold and you've got 28 days to make it safe, or we're going to take enforcement action against you. So how many property landlords would be happy with a month-long delay in their project just because the builder didn't put the scaffold up properly?
Wow. I'm a landlord or somebody listening now and I'm interested in that. How long does it take for me to sit it? What's involved in gaining the qualification?
So first of all, it's fully CPD accredited, which means it's tax deductible from your business. So you can sit our course, which is 3 days long. It's usually done over a weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because we want to try and minimize the time that you would spend in your job. In those 3 days, you are going to be taken through a cradle to grave project, some of it large, some of it small. So by the end of it, you're going to fully understand what your duties are as the client, what your builder's duties are as the builder, and what the designers and the principal designers' duties are as well. And you're going to be able to not only do that, but audit it, because for this year, 2025, we're actually giving people 3 months totally free of charge access to our exclusive, where they can access all the documents they need. And for the first couple of courses that we're running, we're actually given the option for those attendees, they can have a 1-hour telephone call with me to discuss any of their projects that they've got ongoing or in the pipeline, where I can do a video tour with them of their project and give them advice, totally complimentary if they're on the course.
Wow, it's incredible. So if you could have coffee or lunch with anybody on the planet, past, present, or future, who would that be and why?
My nan. And the reason for that is because my nan was pretty much like my mum, and I absolutely idolized the woman. But she gave me the best piece of advice that I never really understood, which was, as long as you've got your rent paid, you can sit on orange boxes. And what she was really talking about took me decades to figure out. But basically, there's loads of people who are living this extravagant lifestyle in bad debt.
Mm.
And what she was talking about is actually, don't get yourself in bad debt. Make sure that your home is looked after first. Everything else is a secondary concern. And it took me a long time to figure that out. Obviously, I learned about the difference between good debt and bad debt between now and then. But I would love to be able to sit with her and say, look at what's happened, because you gave me that foundation at the time that was a bit cryptic, but you gave me that foundation that was able to propel me now professionally as a business professional and as a property professional from that one piece of advice where that acorn was dropped in my brain. So I'd love to say thank you and show her what that little acorn has achieved.
Yeah, that's lovely. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I believe that your nan would be, like the same kind of generation as mine. And certainly my mum's generation, where they're like a different breed entirely, right? This is why the breed of today, of these like young people referred to as like the snowflake generation or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the care industry, and an example that I have from that was I went to make some cheese sandwiches for an elderly couple, and I was like, "Oh, there's a bit of mold on the cheese," and I was like, "So we're gonna have to throw it out." She go, "Oh, no, 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 just scrape it off."
Yeah.
I was like, "But the mold goes all the way through. You can't see it, but it's there." She went, "We're war babies. We don't throw anything away,
Wow. There
right?"
you go.
And that lesson for me has stuck with me. They've both sadly passed away, both of those lovely couple. Um, but the mindset that they have is, we don't waste anything. But now
Mm.
we're in this throwaway culture where everything lasts once, and you are entitled to get these things for free. And they're like, no, we don't do anything like that, because if we did not have that, we would do without. And, the next time
Yeah.
the ration book comes along, we might get some cheese if there's any left. Because they were still in rations in the 50s, and they were war
Yeah.
babies, she said.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true, but I can fully relate because growing up, my nan and my mum, we had bread that had a bit of mold. You scratched it off and you threw it in the toaster. Like that is how we
Abs-
lived. I grew
abs-
up eating food out of date.
I grew up putting water in the milk, because we
Yeah.
didn't have enough money to buy milk.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we put water in it, shook it up, and put it on our horrible cornflakes, and it was horrible, but that's what you had. So
yeah, yeah.
it-
So, Carl, last question. If fast forward 5 years from now, wave a magic wand, it's 2030, what does life look like?
well, we've already financially retired, but we're still working. We're still working because I mean, I can only speak for myself. I think my wife would probably massively disagree with me on this, but I love what I do. I love helping people. I love growing the business. I love giving people opportunities, particularly our overseas workers. But in 5 years, where would I be? We've probably grown the business another 10x. Hopefully, retire to a beautiful hot country, Dubai or the Philippines or Thailand or somewhere like that. And yeah, I imagine just helping people at a slower pace and picking and choosing things then.
Carl, it's been amazing to have you on today. If there's anybody in the audience that wanted to reach out, either to learn about your incredible CDM program or work with you in some other way, what's the best way for them to do that, please?
Social media, I'm always on Facebook. Anybody that's probably seen my content knows I'm on there. So getting out to me on my social media, or you can go to better-safety.co.uk and you can find our contact details there.
And the podcast, what's the name of the podcast for anyone who wants to listen to it?
Yeah, podcast Lazy Wealth Creation is on all of the major podcast platforms and also on YouTube. So you can download it from there as well.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, look, Carl, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. You've been amazing. It's been really insightful for me, and I really appreciate your time.
No problem. My pleasure. Thanks very much for having us on.
So that's Carl Mannion, an incredible guy, someone who's came from very humble beginnings like me and is going on to create a massive generational wealth legacy for his children and grandchildren, and someone who is extremely inspirational, a man that knows what it means to go from zero to millionaire and is not looking to slow down or stop anytime soon.